Ladies and gentlemen, we are preparing for our second quarterfinal on the opposite side of the bracket. Today, we shall decide who wins Ascension number 3. Well, I guess technically we'll decide the grand finals. And for me, it'll be taking place on midnight, which is technically tomorrow. That'll be the grand finals, of course. So, hello, Ben Taberski. Welcome. We even have a roller skates here. A surprise roller skates. Get your roller skates equipped. There it is. Easy. So we're going to kick things off with a pick ban while I wait for DF to respond. As the higher seed, he is able to decide if he wants to pick 2 maps, or pick the starter map and ban 1 map, or if he wants to ban 2 maps and let Mesk pick 1, ban 1. That is the part where mixed play would have clown horns, but unfortunately, mixed play is dead. Dead, Jim. It looks like Mesk is going to have to play a MOBA map in Warcraft 3 later, so he may not be available for casting. But that's assuming he doesn't defeat DF and qualify for the next stage of the playoffs. Hello, it could happen. Oh, roller skates. Did you see that we have a new Quasilisk sprite in the progress of being developed? It's pretty epic, honestly. Not a problem to accidentally watch them, honestly. What's the big deal? That is true, I suppose. Mesk has banned out pretty much the 2 major standard maps. Death Spiral is also a standard-ish map, but it's something new, so I don't think DF was comfortable playing on it. Ergo, all we have left are... Well, Repulsion is standard. Nitro Valley is 4-player. Nemesis Station's okay, you know, for standard. It's also a little bit new to people. And then Infinite Velocity, Maim Street. So, I'll see what DF wants to pick. And then we'll get into it. I expect this to be a very cheesy and silly series. Mesk has already been sillying himself. We got Fagudo. He's obviously rooting for the man himself. Caster competition represent. The sole random of the tournament. I don't know, have you seen Mesk? He's pretty much the opposite of that. Nemesis Station is selected by DarkenedFantasies to kick our series off. And IskatuMesk will join us after a brief interruption. This matchup is a Protoss versus Random. DF will have to see if he has what it takes to survive IskatuMesk's cheese. Obviously, DF is the favorite here, but I don't think it's as heavy a favorite as Mesk claims. He's very doomer about his own level of skill and his chances, but I think he can maybe... he can make things interesting. But we have to wait and see what race he rolls once we get in here. All right, let's get ready to rumble. Nemesis Station by Balathal will host our first matchup here. It's Canada on Canada action, as they have met in the semifinals, or quarterfinals, excuse me. Semifinals is what we're qualifying for. And Mesk has rolled Terran. Instantly saturating his geyser, he will aim to go for either a quarry opener or a fulcrum opener. Time will tell. DF, on the other hand, Protoss, a familiar sight, a manly man, an ultramarine man versus the glacial Mesk. We'll see who gets on the board bright and early. Nemesis Station is home to one of the most enrapturing games, or actually a couple of really, really good games. I think they were both involving 3Crow. One of them was in the group stage, and the other one was yesterday in the quarterfinals against Beaver. It was the one that he managed to pick up. I think it was map 2 in that series. I'll timestamp them, of course, later on, so I'll refresh my memory. Pretty solid stuff overall. Glad to see some of the games that happened yesterday. If you missed game 2 of the Mystery Meet versus 3Crow series for the semifinals, well, you missed some pretty good activity. It will be a fulcrum in a bit of a pocket position here. He can actually lift this off and hopscotch it down so that he can cut down on a lot of rotation timing, but it's mostly just because Mesk likes to hide his tech. That way, DF is paranoid. Oh, shit. What, is he proxying me? What's going on here? But he does see a Mason Scout, so right now there's no alarm bells ringing, and really no need for any alarm bells to ring just yet. It is a cenotaph following the gateway, so we are going to be seeing some fast-ish movements for the general... I would say, like, when you're looking at something like this, it's fairly standard. He can afford a Drakedon, but it's a couple of seconds delayed, and he goes for an Ecclesiast instead. He has discovered the Fulcrum, but it's a little bit late, so he might have been paranoid more than he cared to admit. And a vulture will be created on site as opposed to, you know, lifted, landed, and jumped over towards this anchor, which is being constructed. And safe to say there could be some silliness happening here. I think the Cenotaph is just far enough away that it will not be able to spot this, but I could technically be right. No, it's just like 1 or 2 hexes out of range, so he's not going to see that. But I say that, and I think maybe he has spotted it. So, make a liar out of me. Absolutely slapped. And he will now proceed to tickle the anchor and use the cliff advantage to ward off the Mason. Now, the anchor can lift off and start to be repaired, but with a second Ecclesiast and a Legionnaire already out, it seems very unlikely that it's going to offer too much. This Scribe has actually been able to continue to scout info. If he moves a little bit further down, he's going to confirm that indeed there's a second Fulcrum here, and he's even going to start tickling the Mason. How annoying. Only a single Vulture in here means that it can't get the sustained damage off onto the Legionnaire. So the Ecclesiasts are keeping it healed, topped off, and that will be the death of the Vulture. Unless his Lobotomy Mine is able to save him. It looks like he will be. Certainly the death of the Anchor could have lifted off and maybe evacuated. There's going to be a Matador here. And unfortunately, it was not pulled in time to save the poor, poor Mason. Now, with this Lobotomy Mine in this position, it does feel like he can hold. There is an anchor being constructed. The other one was delayed, obviously. And the second Fulcrum is being produced, as well as a Star Pad. He's going to go ahead and pull the Matador forward so that he can hopefully fend off the Legionnaire menace. The burn damage should keep the Legionnaires pretty unhappy with their situation. Obviously, the Ecclesiasts themselves can just sit here and take it. There's a Blackjack and 2 Vultures coming afterwards. The Blackjack has just completed. The Star Pad should be just fine, and the Vulture is garrisoning inside the anchor. So we are definitely seeing some pressure being put up over here. Those units are completely canceled as the Fulcrums lift off. I think this will be the death of the Matador, though. I don't think that Mesk was able to pay too much attention there, and he's body blocking his own Blackjack, which is doomed by the Drakedin. I think his attempt at trying to be cheeky with his tech placement has pretty much taken care of this position entirely. And the rest of his forces were not able to repair the anchor, didn't end up drilling the Legionnaires, and so DF just smashes him straightforwardly. And that's why, you know, Mesk is going to say, oh, he had to play non-standard, he had to play silly, he had to play cheeky. But I feel like if he had just gone for something a little bit more straightforward and had slightly better unit control, he would have held on, and then DF would have been overcommitted on military with no way to break. That would have been an advantage for him to come back in a macro sense. But, as it stands, DF will claim the first map. And Mesk will pick map 2. And I will open up the situation here. Maim Street is going to be our second map, and I will host the lobby while I update the scores. Now, I do suppose that the overwhelming number of the games on Maim Street have been fairly fast, or at least like sub 10 minutes. But there were a couple of TVTs and other general matchups where that was not the case. Now, Mesk has rolled Zerg, definitely his strongest race. I have a feeling that Mesk is similar to the Shambler in that his best race is Zerg, his second best race is Protoss, his worst race being Terran. So if he can manage to be favored with the gods of the RNG, he might be able to achieve something in this matchup that he himself does not yet believe in. Will he be going cheesy? The double gas mining suggests as much, but it could also be a Hydrock opener. He did say to me that every time he goes Hydrock, he feels like he loses, so I suspect this will end up being something on the Zork's side. That being said, it's yet to be determined as to whether or not he's going to do that. It looks like he's going to cut the worker so he can get it out ever so slightly faster, and he will be good to go here. So it comes down before a minute. The gateway on the other side is just now starting. So relatively even timing there, and DF will, of course, confirm the scout. Keeping 3 workers on gas does indicate to me that it's likely going to be Lakizilisks, but it could be something else. I mean, Lakizilisk plus Avaleth, that's going to be more on the gas-intensive side than a Gorgorkor, which is going to be a little bit more on the mineral-intensive side. So that's usually how you can keep tabs on that, and we'll see if DF is aware of that. There's some instant kerfluffling, which will slow the gas quite substantially. He still has enough to make the Lakizilisk happen, but now he's not going to be able to instantly train an Avaleth. So if that was his plan, particularly on Maim Street, it does feel like maybe he's been sassed out of it. Now that one worker is definitely going to continue to be the target of DF Sassening, and it will be killed. Absolute madness. And it will instead be a Gorgorkor, which is not a bad shout. I mean, Drakedins obviously can ward them off once you hit the second Drakedin count, and it will be completed before the Gorgorkor can make it over there, or even indeed hatch. Although I don't think it was due to the harassment and tickling. I think it was just due to the general way that the layout worked. It's probably about as fast as you can get the Gorgorkor. And now that the Zorka's Shroud is indeed completed, and more Droleths are being produced afterwards behind this, the Drakedin is actually being waypointed across the map. The second one is a little over halfway done, so it will end up taking some time before the Gorgorkor will be warded off. We should see a couple of worker kills here. That's going to be 3 worker kills, in fact, and the Drakedin has actually been recalled, so now we're going to see a 4th if Mesk continues to do it. He's getting tismed a little bit here. Yep, he's definitely tismed. He's having a good time. Back at home, he's queued up, I assume, 2 more Gorgorkors. Or no, he's actually not queued up any other military units. And in the meantime, he went for a Circuith. Interesting. I feel like that's probably the wrong choice, but nonetheless, he was able to get 3 worker kills, and now is up on a worker by technicality. So his Gorgorkor has, at the very least, forced off any early aggression in the early minutes here. And a Lakizilisk plus a Circuith will definitely protect this base, it feels like, at least from the conventional ramp path, which is what DF was going for initially. That's assuming he even wants to leave. He's going to first get a Warden alongside his Cenotaph. And he will be opting into Hierophants. So if there is a transition into a more ground-focused composition, it does feel like, indeed, the Lakizilisk force will be a little bit better equipped to deal with this. The Gorgorkor will probably be at about 100 HP by the time the Lakizilisk shows up, and can assist that burrowed unit in attacking the worker line. Meanwhile, Azorius, as well as what I presume will be a Larvosk when it is eventually told to mutate into something. There it is. Is in a pretty good spot. Now, he does need to get this burrowed. Well, he's a little bit cautious of that. Obviously, you can just stand right on top of it in order to get the reveal. But the Gorgorkor was not in position, so this is a little bit tricky, and the Lakizilisk is going to have to withdraw. It does get spotted exiting, so he's kind of lost track of it now, DF, but he doesn't want to leave his entire base undefended, and it goes for a second Warden so that he can start to move out a little bit more confidently. More Lakizilisks, more Gorgorkors are on the way, but this is not a reasonable composition by itself. It does need some sort of front line to supplement it. That could be Zorius, but it's usually better off with some Hydras for the mixed damage to guarantee it, and Izirikors as the general front line to accept early harassment and early attacks in general. For that, I think Mesk would need to expand, and he does have the money to do so, with a worker being sent off to this faraway land, not taking the more conventional natural. If you can ever call anything on Maim Street conventional. Reasonable-ish map control here, as a scribe is going to move directly towards the enemy base for a rescout. It will see the Circuith and probably hear the Lakizilisk spines as an embassy is being put together. So witnesses will reveal Lakizilisks, and that will most likely stop DF from being in a volatile position, at which point we can probably see this game turn into a little bit more of a macro-oriented fight. Well, the Scribe will continue to exist, and Gorgorkors will attempt to hunt it down. But even showing that you have 3 of these, if DF was attentive, or at the very least 2, if he just tabbed back to the alert, is going to be enough for him to feel perhaps slightly worried about air units, and therefore I feel like maybe those Gorgon cores won't be as effective. An Ovolith has been created. We will be seeing a drop at some point, and another Lekizalisk just going to probe over here and see if it can maybe burrow to be somewhat annoying. Another Warden to make sure that the Gorgon cores can't do much damage, but, well, we can see here that 3 of these Wardens are powered by a single pylon. That could be something that bites him in the ass if he's not careful, as there are now 4 Gorgon cores. Once they hit a certain mass, it's going to be a lot harder for DF to deal with them. That being said, there are no Lekizalisks, or any unit, in fact, guarding this position, and this Droleth didn't even turn into a Hachirosk, so depending on the timing here, as the Lekizalisk does get 3 worker kills before getting stomped on, the timing could favor DF for the attack. There might not be anything that ends up going on here. So indeed, the pylon will be focused down. At least 1 Gorgon core will die for its sins. Now there, make that 2. The red overlay means that there's reduced attack rate. That's courtesy of the Hierophant. And the blue overlay simply means that when withdrawing from enemy units, they lose movement speed. A lot of Striders are in this position, and the Lekizalisks are not in position themselves. The Ovolith will spot for the Witnesses, and that indeed will be the end of that. But again, the Lekizalisks need to be unburrowed and positioned such that they can push away this menace. He calls GG despite having the Lekizalisks. It doesn't feel like it was over, particularly when you see that there was only 14 workers left for DF, but Mesk perhaps feeling overwhelmed and maybe even forgetting that he had the Lekizalisks to begin with. An unceremonious end to his antics on Maim Street. I assume he will be selecting Infinite Velocity for the Nidus shenanigan. He's opted for... They both went for the 3rd slot, which is quite funny to me. Anyway, this is Nitro Valley, a 4-player map. We will see who claims victory here. It was surprisingly selected by Mesk. I thought he would go for Infinite Velocity for the Nidus memes. I imagine if Mesk claims victory here, the pick from DF will be Repulsion, and then we will go on to a decider on Infinite Velocity if Mesk continues to impress. That is all theoretical for now. I don't know. I feel like Mesk definitely was still in the game that time. He didn't actually get his expansion set up, but he could have gone for a, reposition on the Lekizalisks, and with no witness to detect them, as soon as they burrowed, he would have been in a very fine position to hold that attack with probably minimal losses in terms of workers. Added to the fact that, again, there were only 14, DF was not macroing very well whatsoever. In that context, I feel like it just would have normalized, most likely, into some kind of different game. And the Ovolith could have also been used for a drop. He might have ended up making that Ovolith specifically to spot for Witnesses, so that the Lekizalisks could be getting their spine attacks up. Maybe a distant memory of ZVP and Brood War, where the same thing happens for Overlords and Lurkers and Observers. It was all Striders, too, so the surface area that DF had available to him to actually get off those attacks, particularly with the shorter-ranged attackers like the Hierophants, I think it was quite low, and with the Hierophants being the faster units on the front line, when you withdraw with them and the Drakedons are behind them, the slower and clunkier unit of the two, it does feel like in that context it would have taken a bit of a time for those units to fall away. So, we'll see what happens in this 3rd match. Maybe things will be different. On a 4-player map like Nitro Valley, you expect the game to be potentially less volatile, just because if you're gonna cheese, you need to scout much sooner. Mesk has rolled Protoss, so he has now gotten 1 of every single race, and DF is once again on the bottom of the map. This is just like the first match, where it was on Nemesis Station. In fact, it's exactly the same spawns. It's cross spawns. DF is checking the corners here, looking for the ramp. Probably hasn't played too many matches on this. Mesk has seen this map and played on this map, so it's a little bit easier for him. Actually, him and I played a lot of games, ZVTs and similar things, where he was trying to use diadems to provoke my units. This is back when they could attack air and everything. Some very silly macro games back in those days. Now, Mesk has decided to cross Scout. This is not normally what I feel like people do in 4-player maps, but it's going to work out for him. Meanwhile, DF most likely going to end Scout. The gateway on the low ground is a classic move. Might be interested in doing some kind of wall off, but when he sees that his opponent is Protoss, that will likely change. This is probably a Strider-type wall off, so he's going to have to be careful with Mesk. Mesk is going to have to be careful with his gateway rally. However, scouting a gateway, probably a gateway expansion or maybe a gateway cenotaph move out is definitely going to help. And his worker has been allowed to evade enemy detection. However, DF is, maybe he saw the cast over uploaded earlier today, and Mesk is now aware that his worker has been scouted. Didn't have the guts to see if he could continue that silliness, but it doesn't matter because DF had reinforcements. Wasn't going to do the honorable thing and do the mono-e-mono fight. It will be a Drakenen opener for both players, and Mesk is slightly faster. Doesn't block the ramp with his worker in time, even though he probably saw it with a pylon. So that's going to contribute towards DF's ability to get comprehensive scouting intel and see how many workers are on gas compared to minerals. Now, fairly even, although Mesk is a little bit late on the worker count there. Also only mining with 12 of his 14 workers at this stage, by the way. He's corrected that now, and indeed the Drakenen is in a position where I do not believe it can get through. It could technically squeeze through that. Well, it could potentially squeeze through that, but we would need to see if Mesk even tries to make that happen. Now, DF could sass his opponent here. It could happen. A Warden has been placed on the low ground. Meanwhile, DF has gone for a Cenotaph. Will there be something silly happening over here? Like, you could put a Cenotaph in here with a pylon, but it's going to get scouted by Mesk anyway, so that's not going to happen, nor would it end up being cataclysmic. Well, we say that, but that would definitely force Mesk to pull his Drakenins through the hole if it is indeed possible. He's instead going to feign a move out, perhaps. When DF moves down here, he will probably notice that there are no Drakenins. Might be a little bit concerned. Now, in PvP, when you do have equal matchups, really in any mirror matchup, when there's even in terms of, military production possible, you do have to worry yourself about, do I have enough to actually break him? Plus, there's defender's advantage to think about. So that is obviously not going to work too nicely for Mesk in this situation if he does want to be a little bit more on the aggressive side. However, he's seemingly spent a lot of his money on another Warden and maybe this Drakenen that's being produced, so he doesn't have enough to expand. If he wants to go for a more macro-oriented game and just, rely on his static defense alongside the military units he does have, that could work out, but instead he's building a rogue gallery down here. Why there, though? That blocks the Nexus. Maybe he wants to do a Crucible expand. Maybe that would fit there. I'm actually not sure. We'll keep tabs on that. DF is very stable in his openers. Every single match in Ascension number 3, he has gone for the gateway into Cenotaph play, either going for Mass Legionnaire to back up Drakenen Ecclesiast, or going Hierophants and, eschewing the Ecclesiasts, because at that point, obviously, you're in an awkward position for the gas spending. He doesn't tend to expand too frequently, but he does have the money to do that now, and is starting to move out across the map. It will be a Kabbalist. That is going to be the unit of choice, and once again, Mesk is considering what to do. He's going to go ahead and drop another gateway. He does have the ability to focus fire his opponent, but there is a witness following this attack squad, so I don't actually think the Kabbalist is going to be as effective as it would have been otherwise. Back at home, there are no static defenses. If, for example, the Kabbalist is able to escape without so much as arousing some suspicion, this could end up working out quite well. The number of Drakenins is clearly in favor for Mesk, and he is doing well with his focus firing. I swear I saw a witness. I actually don't know where it ended up going. And just some more shots, doing some decent hull damage. Maybe I hallucinated the witness. There's an envoy being rallied across the map. And the witness is actually in the main, so there it is. We found it. We figured out where it is. However, it's not actually going to spot the Kabbalists. Now, one of them is with this Drakenen army, and a push could occur, as there's a double Warden and an engram, so that shuts down any hope of DF expanding. He has an envoy. Will he be using that for anything in particular? We have yet to find out. And the Kabbalist is going to go ahead and try to sneak through, but instead, he's just going to get slapped. I thought maybe he would try to sneak them in and get some good scouting intel, but instead, he wound up trying to make the attempt work, and, well, that didn't quite find success there. A second gateway being added, well, it's actually a third for Mesk, but a second on the low ground. The Rogue Gallery will probably start to transition out of Kabbalists and into Vagrants at some point. They are quite effective. And the Hierophants here, you can see, are slowing the Drakenins down quite considerably, with the other ones just sort of abandoning him, saying, yeah, well, so long, buddy. The Witness will come on down here and reveal the position of the Rogue Gallery. The sound effect you're hearing from the corpses of the units, when you have that red overlay signifying there's cowardice for the blue overlay, and the red overlay is malice. Malice reduces attack rate, and if the unit dies with that affected, they give a debuff, well, or rather a buff to all of the enemy units. So in this particular case, DF's units around that corpse would have gained attack rate. But there was no sustained attack in that context, so didn't end up making a difference. A third base is being put together here. Well, actually, that's a natural. I keep thinking he's got a base here. He doesn't. Another Warden, an embassy for his own witnesses, and, of course, DF has a witness of his own as well. He does have a double envoy. I'm curious as to what he plans to use with these. He's actually relocating. This is dirty. I don't think Mesk is even aware that this is a possibility. Now, it's not all like the be-all, end-all, because he can move, his units over here into this position to catch it if it ends up being a little bit too slow. He might even just have ambient defenses in this area by that time, but it looks like DF is going to go ahead and pull the trigger on the attack, or the strategy. The Kabbalists can certainly slip through, and maybe the Wardens are going to be in a good position to attack the pylon, depending on where it unloads. He is going to see the dots here, and he's going to see that there's a double envoy. So there comes the engram, but it is within range, and I think it's just going to die, so that's pretty funny. He's probably quite amazed that it's even feasible to do that. I think he might have had to, yeah, he has to like manually retarget it or something. The scribes have been pulled away, so no scribes are even going to die. Never mind. Forget I say that. And there you go. Unpowered. He can just pick it up if he wants to, but the mining has totally shut down. Mesk is absolutely flabbergasted. He can't believe what he's seeing. And meanwhile, DF is just going to go ahead and build more structures. Still not interested in expanding. Clearly there is indeed a witness somewhere, because that one was detected. I actually don't know where the witness would have been. Maybe towards the choke somewhere? So hard to spot the witnesses. There's one. I like the attempt. I am quite surprised that it ended up going in the way that it did. Not the best position to put your engram, for the record. And they are fairly vulnerable because their strength is keeping enemy forces at bay. Now, this base is going to get collapsed upon, but there are already some Drakenins over here. So it doesn't look like DF is going to be able to find success in this area. Some Zealots, again, some Vagrants, or a Vagrant, have been sighted. The Cabal is doing its best to teleport to its opponent and try to close the gap. While it's cloaked, it can teleport to close the distance instantaneously, but obviously when it attacks, it uncloaks itself. That's how stealth works in CMBW in general. Meanwhile, just checking the tech, we have more Drakenins, of course. A witness is here to spot for the Kabbalist. Prevent it from getting a clean execution. Against Protoss, I'm not so sure that the Kabbalist is the right choice anyway, but obviously can do a pretty good amount of damage to workers. Doesn't one-shot workers anymore, not like the old days. Workers have a little bit more beef to them now. And at this stage, maybe Mesk can isolate a position and pick off some of these units, make DF bleed for removing the number of Striders that he's got in his base. Keep him contained. Yeah, at this stage we are seeing a good number. Now, there's a lot more envoys now, or at least an extra envoy. The other one didn't get killed. And Mesk is doing his best to move his units and order them to hold position. There we go. Now he's going to do what he can. Classic. Don't worry, we already fixed that. Yeah, at this stage, I don't think that the Hierophant and the... I don't think any of that is going to work out to his favor here. He is unloading the engram, so he's like creeping forward with his defenses. It's a very silly process. Some defenses going up on the second base. I can't call it the natural, because this is the natural. More Striders, a lot more Striders, keeping his money low. You can't say the same for DF, who is very low on gas. And here come the attempts here. I think that engram was... It's clearly not firing, so something broke with it. I'm curious as to what that might be. I think maybe he lifted it off and got absolutely slapped. There's no witness for Mesk, so he can't actually try to snipe it. I'm pretty sure as soon as DF retargets with it, it'll work just fine, but he doesn't yet know that. I don't know if he's pulled the trigger there. There it is. It might even be a power thing, honestly. Like, for all I know, when you load the pylon that was powering it originally, it doesn't, like, update properly. Who knows? All that stuff could be very buggy. I mean, I think it's probably indubitable that it is very buggy just looking at this. So, DF trying an experimental feature and confirming that it does not, in fact, work properly. So a Crucible is coming down here. It's mostly just going to allow the gas harvesting, and you can see this aura display to tell you that it will probably affect this gateway, definitely affect this one, and the Rogue Gallery, plus any other production facilities that are put here. Indeed, there's not good spot here for, no good spot for a town center. So I think Mesk is just going to have to deal with long-distance mining if he wants anything out of his natural, or he's going to have to destroy this goddamn Rogue Gallery and build a Nexus there. But instead, he's building a Warden, so clearly he's not interested in that. A Nexus has been started for DF in his natural. He's not some insane person who expands to his third first. That's 3. Witness patrols. Once this Warden is complete, obviously this one will be taken care of. But DF will have some vision on his opponent's base, and if he keeps tabs on that, he'll know that there's a synthetic Synod on the way. Either Empresses to deal with the massive ground infantry, or Demiurges to deal with the heavier targets. Either one will be a very potent tool. I think Empresses would be the better choice due to their bouncing attack. Oh, I guess actually I don't think they bounce anymore, but they fire fast, so they're a little bit better for that. Might not even come to that, though. There's a lot of Striders, and all of those forces ended up getting cleaned up. No engrams anymore. They've been deployed. And Scribes may kill them. He's going after the pylons, but there's 2 of them powering it, and he doesn't have any forces lying around here, so while DF refuses to manually target things, yeah, we're going to see a lot of Scribe Massacre kills here, but this Nexus is also being contained. Oh, he's trying to pick it up. Okay, he does manage to get away with it. There's still only 1 pylon. You can see there's a little bit of tower juggle micro here, and that Dracodon is not long for this world. Going after it with the Scribes, maybe that would have made a difference before the Dracodon had been killed. But at this stage, his natural has been shut down. Well, his third base. His natural is this. More units are coming out. Lots of production facilities for DF, but I don't think that he's got the income to sustain such a thing. In fact, he's left his Wardens unpowered by trying to bring so many of them in for the engram. Another attempt at taking its life was made, but was not successful. And yeah, I think actually Mesk has kill pressure here. He just needs to charge up this ramp and deal with the rank file fodder. Some Amaranths are here. I think maybe one of these has a pylon. Nope, doesn't look like it. He left it over there. And okay, oh yes, one of them did have a pylon and does repower the Wardens just in the nick of time. The tower juggling is impressive, but I think the Strider count is still too damn high. However, Mesk is allowing some of his units to be pulled into unwise deaths. Now he's finally shut down the engram and can start to build more workers. Even though he's been attacked and harassed and etc., it's still not enough. Well, unfortunately for him, he's going to need an envoy to deal with that. But it's still not quite enough for him to be behind in workers, and he is going to go ahead and take a cheeky base somewhere. Looks like right over here, or maybe he's just intending to build engrams and ferry them over with his envoy or something. He's going to go ahead and take care of this Warden, and then path through here if he can. I don't actually know. You might still not be able to make it all the way around. Demiurges are fat, man. He's going to unload the Scribe, but it's, you know, it's covered, so I don't know. DF will surely hear this or see this eventually. Still being sassed. Just barely in vision on the low ground. I wish we could make this more consistently fixed, but unfortunately, not quite. Zealots, witnesses, all over the place. He does manage to make it out, I think, but he can't make it through this, so he's really still just fucked. Change the rally point, my man. More Kabbalists? Hey, the Demiurge can be pretty good defense. These Striders are now going to get cleaned up. Zealot guarding this base. More idle workers in the third. Natural still very behind. But still, Mesk has almost 50 workers to DF's 19. He's mining out his base. He's going to have very, very limited income very soon. Can still go for a Storm Drop. Has opted to just right-click the Cantavis out on the field of battle. And an Envoy seemingly has withdrawn that Demiurge. So it will be marched off to the front lines. It can even take command of this Witness if he wants. I imagine it'll just end up dying. Absolutely annihilated. The Demiurge is a tier 4 unit, but it doesn't really do very well against massive numbers of lower tier units, especially Legionnaires that can body block it, or, you know, its own friendly Zealots that can do the same thing. Now, he is tagging a large number of units, which means that eventually they will start to turn on their owners, as you can see here. But not for very long, because the Demiurge is withdrawing and falling far away. An Empress is on the way. I did say that this would be the preferable option of the two versus the composition that DF is doing his best to do. Another Witness falls to the Demiurge. Galactic Weaver, galactically weaving. Going after that third base is the play, and it looks like a pylon was made here. I don't see any other wreckage, so I suppose there was nothing else. I did hear an explosion, but I'm not quite sure what it was. This force gets cleaned up. Once again, holding strong in this general area. The Amaranths are slowly being eaten. A single one is up here inappropriately attacking Scribes. Kabbalist trying to close the gap. And I assume, I guess DF must be talking about the load-unload thing. Maybe that's the explosion I heard somewhere. Now that we've actually seen it in action, I'm sure it'll be trivial to fix. That being said, I'm really amazed that he even went for it to begin with. I think it's something that just hit him in the spur of the moment, and then at some point you realize, wait, I've never done this before. Does it even work? Unfortunately, the answer in a programmatic sense is no, but that's okay. When you next play the game, I promise you it will. In a commanding position, IskatuMesk. A base finally being put down by DF, but he has almost nothing at home. If only Mesk had a Witness that he was going to use in the enemy base. He does have 2 Empresses, which, if DF was paying attention, sided with this Witness. And now he's going to go ahead and try to move out. This looks like a Mesk victory through and through. And maybe some of those, some of the changes would have happened if the engrams had attacked correctly. I'm not 100% sure. It definitely feels like some of his Striders would have been more softened up, or maybe he would have just never been able to, make it to attack this particular ledge and had to more immediately move over. But it does feel like DF's spending was a bigger cause for concern. There's still a Warden over here, and a Cantavis can make some Storm Drops happen, but the response is a little bit too slow, I think. And with the Empresses on the way and the Witness actually spotting them, I don't actually know that DF has any options. The GG is called as the Empresses arrive to start absolutely slapping. And Mesk is on the board. An awkward game, but a funny one anyway. Again, Repulsion, DF can just play standard. Infinite Velocity, okay, you can deal with you can go to a very long macro game and deal with the fact that there's lots of gas in the main, but also deal with the Nidus. As predicted, Repulsion is selected by DarkenedFantasies, who probably styles himself as a stronger standard fare player. And that being said, though, this is the group stage starter. So this is something that everybody has played a lot. I don't think Mesk will feel particularly uncomfortable about this particular matchup. And Mesk has rolled Zerg. Again, likely his best race. I guess Protoss is his best cheese race, but Zerg is his best all-around race. So we'll see how that one works out. I think he would unlock a lot more potential for the race if he more regularly used egg rallies. But we'll get to that eventually. I do some sponsored sips and read out some of the names of our lovely contributors for this season of Cosmonarchy Brood Wars tournament season, competitive season. I don't have a good name for it yet, but I don't have any water. How can I do a sponsored sip without water? But shout out to Ben Taberski, 3 Crow, Enozilix, and Alexander. I think those 4 are the main ones who have donated towards the prize pool. And I think in that order is the order of their contributions. So, cool stuff. Very much appreciate it. Also may have mispronounced Enozlik's name, but he can correct me later if he watches this. Quasrock first is not something that we see too often, but there is some gas being harvested, so I would assume it's going to be a Nathracor push. I'm not sure that he remembers that Naths are now 50 gas, but so is the Larvosk. So it could just be he's harvesting enough gas for a Larvosk, and that's about it. Maybe he just wants to try to Zeth flood him. If he goes for Drakedons first again, or even Ecclesiast with no Zealot support, the Zethrakors could be very effective. And it is indeed a Zethrakor first. 1 more gas return, and he'll have enough for the Larvosk. Doesn't have enough minerals just yet, and keeps it on the gas, so maybe occasionally throwing in some moves there. Maybe he also wants to just keep harvesting gas for now, so that DF doesn't immediately get somewhat suspicious. And the Zeths will perpetually chase the Scribe. It's never going to work in a way that's actually going to kill them, so. You do have to micro them. There you go. Mesk figuring that out. But not before you sight 2 more Zethrakors coming out. I think you have to be somewhat suspicious. If they turn into Vorvs, that could be the death of the Drakedon. That being said, they are 50 a pop, so I'm not so sure that that'll end up happening. We do see 2 of them. And I think before they show up, there will be an Ecclesiast. But again, Vorvs are very, very durable in this particular engagement, and I think there's just going to be a ton of Zeths. There's enough for a single pair of Naths as well with the gas, because they're 50 gas now, I think 75 minerals. So that's something to keep in mind as well. A small band of Zethrakors on the way. There are some egg rallies, but they are not being rallied to the the actual intended destination, it looks like. So Mesk is going to have to manually rally them again afterwards. And he does have some Zeths mixed in with his worker line here. So I don't know if that'll be enough, but good initial situation here for DF. He is adding another gateway, which is going to slow down his next military unit. Leading with the Zeths is not the best of ideas, and he instantaneously loses 2 of them due to the cliff advantage. Seeing that, what is his next move going to be? He could go for an Ovaleth and Elevator, or he could go for some Naths, or he could simply go for a macro game. Maybe opt for a limited contain, whatever can be done. It only takes 3 hits for the Zethrakors to die to a Drakedon. Gonna go ahead and see if he can charge through. The Legionnaire and the Ecclesiast are not very durable, and some of them do end up getting surrounded. Already killing one of the Ecclesiast is not a bad shout at all. The Drakedon doing a decent amount of consistent damage, and all of the Vorvakors, bar 1, have already been killed, but he can still go after some of these units here. He just doesn't have any more reinforcements. This is where maybe having 2 more Zeths would have actually made something of a difference there, but they were still wrapped up in the worker line there. Either way, thinning the herd of early game units for the Protoss isn't a bad move. It's just that he's got pretty good sustained production with 2 gateways and a cenotaph. A lot more Zethra-cores have just popped up. Not really great sustained damage in terms of weapon ranges, right? The Quasilisk is a lot more short range, a little bit more favored for dealing with like Mavericks or something to that effect. See what ends up happening here. Legionnaire does charge on forward and will get surrounded and picked off before DF can do anything about it. And so now he has to be a little bit cautious because he sees that many. He knows, okay, well, there's less Droleths than there could be, but definitely a lot more military units than I can handle so far away from my base, so far away from a choke where I can limit that surface area. So he's going to fall back, and Mesk is going to continue to pressure. Behind this, he is expanding. Also, getting a Hydrock Den for additional tech. It's going to be a while before he can fully activate that because he's going to go ahead and saturate his expansion first, or at least get a couple of workers rallied on towards that location. Kagrint back at home just to see what he can do, and a Drakiden that paths out. That could be pounced upon. It looks like it will be. So that is somewhat unfortunate where DF was not managing his units particularly well. Trading one Zethra-core for a Drakiden is beautiful. So, honestly, Mesk is in a really reasonable position here. The Zeth push, not something that DF has dealt with before. A Skithra-core on the way. No static defense, JK. There's actually a Warden and a Matrix, so he's well armed against something like a Nathra-core push. Some Zethra-cores did end up falling prey to a move out there. A second Matrix, a second Pylon, an Embassy for Witnesses. This does mean that he's cutting away from some of the unit production and obviously delaying any would-be expansion, only now starting to use one of his gateways again. This is okay for the Zerg for sure. I mean, he's already harvesting with reasonable saturation. This geyser is actually pushed pretty far away from the base, so you do need 3 for full sat on that. 3, like the third worker, is actually probably fully efficient instead of only 50% efficient. So something to keep in mind. The longer the game goes on without DF claiming another base, the more worried I am for him in this particular matchup. But there's not really much gas being banked here, so Mesk will take a third base before he goes for a tear-up in that context. And remember, it's the breakpoint we're looking at for Zerg is 900 gas. He's also getting a macro hatch, so I think maybe he intends to try to be very, very aggressive in Tier 1. Or perhaps he's just going to bank on getting a ton of Droleths and fully saturate a lot of his gas. Or just a lot of the bases around the whole map. He's got reasonable pressure, but or in terms of general positioning. Second Cenotaph and some more redundancy pylons are coming in for DF. Not really much else to speak of. He does have his first Witness out, and it will fly across the map to provide some vision. Meanwhile, a whole band of Skithra-cores are going to come in and see the static defense and probably turn tail immediately, but it will at least potentially encourage more static defense out of DF. The Spraith, combined with the Ovaleth Patrol, will catch Witnesses, so there will have to be some awareness of that. A lot of those Zeths were just spotted in that position, so maybe that will empower DF to leave his base with some stuff. More Zeths being rallied around, using the macro hatch to good effect. And yeah, actually, I don't know if, I think maybe, so the Witness is going to reveal stuff, right? But I don't know if he's going to stay there. He is actually going to, you know, reveal himself, but this isn't a Spraith yet, right? So I don't think Mesk is actually paying attention there. The Skiths are going to come in. He's going to go after some Scribes, or just a Scribe, and then fly away. Charge back in, perhaps, for another one. Doesn't yet lose a single unit, and yeah, there's just a wall of units in this particular area. He needs to be somewhat careful. He's losing a lot of Zeths for pretty much no reason. Thinking of maybe doing a pincer attack, but the... Well, actually, I mean, this breaks the wall, so in that particular context, he can confirm that all of the ground units have left. And if the Skiths fight with the Zeths and Vorvs, you could see a very pronounced victory for Mesk's army. And instead, the Skiths kind of fly in on their own. There's not really that many units here, but I don't think he realized that his Skiths did this, so he's going to go ahead and finish the job off of one of the Ecclesiasts. A second one has already fallen. So, okay, well, it wasn't cost-efficient at all, but at the very least, it held up the anti-air army, and now the anti-ground army can be managed to some degree. There's a really well-positioned Circuth, there's some Droleths that are idling, and there's some Izira-cores to help clean up the Legionnaires. So this is not going to go super well for DF, depending on how quickly their engagement happens. The Legionnaires are ahead of the Zealots, albeit only minorly. Unfortunately, a lot of the Vorvs ended up dying already, so in that particular context, I think the Iziracors can now get focused down a little bit. Still relatively decent. DF doesn't know about the third base and doesn't seem like he's interested in checking, but there's... Oh, now he will, and confirm that there is indeed a Hacharosk there. Now has the tier 2 money, both minerals and gas, but does he want to bank on being able to deal with that? Looks like he's rallying his units a little bit audaciously here. There's a lot of Protoss. I don't know that he can win this fight. Almost certainly cannot, in fact. And that might end up being an early game before he even spends his money for tech. Starting to withdraw, but pretty awkwardly, and didn't set up any Circuith colonies, so I'm not so sure that he's going to be able to hold on here. The Iral Iris was about to go down, but didn't have enough minerals for it, so adding insult to injury. Has a lot of Zeths, and actually with no front line here, they can be quite effective. So all of the front line targeting that Circuith ends up getting slapped to death by Iziracors. Yeah, in this particular context, you have to wonder, does DF have what it takes to fully close this game? So many more units are being made. The tier 2 still did not make. Mesk doesn't notice it yet. Now he does. Ran out of minerals. No, he forgot that he even was going for a tier 2, apparently. Oh, dear. Thinks it was just an idle worker in the chaos of it all. Instantly going for more Vorvs. I still don't see all of the gas being spent. Kagrant over there turning into a Circuith. Another one can turn into it afterwards. He's going to go ahead and use his skits to confirm. Still no expansion. DF all in on the military off of one base with only 24 workers. Iral Iris now will finally start. It's minutes later than what Mesk wanted. And with only 2 bases, he might not be able to really make a good push out of here. He's left a bunch of units behind. More of them are hatching, trying to surround the Striders, forcing a withdrawal. It's not going to be enough for DF to really just crush this army, I don't think, not without losing a lot of his own units. Zets and Vorvs slowing the withdrawal of all those ranged units, and the front line is already immediately melted because there was only like 2 Zealots and a Legionnaire. An Ecclesiast, probably the next to fall. The bounce damage doing quite well against the Hierophants and the Draconans. There you go, a couple extra bounces, and, well, at that stage, okay, yeah, there's some more military units. The Skits came in here just to get a confirmed scout. There's no other production added. No expansion despite the money float. And yes, there's a lot of Zeths, but they're not really quite there just yet. The front line is now in danger, so Mesk has to withdraw. Lots of Legionnaires and Zealots. He could just stand and fight here if he wants to. He's not going to get good efficiency necessarily. He's going to go ahead and retake the third. And his tier 2 is up, instantaneously upgrading both of his structures. Has the money to go for yet another tech node if he wants. And this macro hatch has saved his life, the extra unit production really coming in the clutch for him. Starting to spread Kagra further closer to his ramp. That will allow him to add more defenses in general. And if he can reset his Ovaleth patrol route, he can even use the fact that it's a Spraith to, well, maybe cover the ground versus enemy witnesses. Not going to get any bespoke tier 2 structures, right? No Muthrock Spire, no Matravel Nest. Getting the tier 2 defenses for now is his main concern as he gets some Hydras to turn into Bactylisks. And he can do that now. His Gorgral Swamp did just complete. DF trying to take not 1, not 2, but 3 extra bases immediately with all the minerals he was floating, and it couldn't have come at a better time since his base is starting to run out. He's going to go ahead and try to take a charge, or at least take some ground. This will be responded to by Mesk, who is stationing some Bactylisks in for a pretty good spot. But I'm not so sure that this can deal with the forces up here. The forces up here can actually deal with this, and the Bactylisk is in such a position that, well, at least if he stations like 4 or 5 of them over here, he can really cover his a lot of his situations, a lot of his attack right into the natural. But he wants to hold the third more definitively. He's also keeping eyes on that base. This one didn't yet get set up. Nexus not finished in either of these spots. Not training additional scribes from the embassy, instead going for more witnesses. It sounds silly because, oh, I have 2,000 workers, but gas is going to be a significant concern. Already capping his geyser in his main. Not yet doing so for the natural or the third, but time will tell, and the rotation is coming in. These units out of position, but there's some tier 2 stuff over here between the Lyrilisks and the Bactylisks. This force will not be long for this world, and I don't think they have what it takes to fully pierce down the Hacharosk either. They're going to have to fall back. Instead, they try to stand and fight. The Ovaleth detects the witness. It goes down as well. More stuff coming in from the bottom, but it just melts to the Basilisks, and that's going to be the end of the majority of DF's military units. He now just has 5. Call him 3 once these Zealots get picked apart. And I think those are actually just witnesses, so... yeah, I don't know. He does not have a single military unit. Some Zethrakors are going to march off to the 3rd base, but it's tough to call that a 3rd when the natural doesn't have any workers. More witnesses getting tickled. The Ovalith not quite being able to find them, and some Tier 2 defenses are incoming for the 3rd base. Not playing his best with the float, that's for sure, but DF does still have an opportunity, albeit a fleeting one, to mount a defense. He'll have to give up pretty much all of those bases, and I think that will mean the end of the tempo. Getting an Ancestral Archives for potentially an Optecton could help him out quite massively here, but I feel like it's just too little too late. There's almost no shot that he's going to successfully, come away with this. Is it really going to, finish? And then also finish the first unit, and have that first unit have enough supplementary income or support in general for the front line. Now, Mesk is taking his sweet time. He's chasing scribes across the map. I don't think he's scouted this base in the bottom right, although he does have an Ovalith here. Maybe he's going to try to drop that. Is starting to, station some Zethrakors in the general vicinity. So with these Wardens here, that will maybe dissuade the attack. Okay, I can see how maybe DF will hold off here, albeit for only momentarily. But honestly, I'm smelling the Mesk comeback. I'm smelling the Mesk 2-2 tie us up. He's not banking any gas and only capped 1 geyser. I should check saturation as well. It looks like it is saturated with 2 workers. You get slightly more income off of 3, remember, so something to keep in mind. It's something that I myself forgot a little bit recently. And desperate for the money, DF now stations many of his units at the front gate. There are no air units coming for Mesk, so he can't pressure the main in the same position. Well, I say that, but there's an ocean of Calculisks, and at least the Nathrakor was scouted by that scribe, so that could be enough to convince DF that he needs to opt for something a little bit heavier hitting. He doesn't have the money to get anything other than maybe an Archon out of that Ancestral Archives. He's getting some engrams, some wardens, but they're covering the main approach. The Calculisks, I think, are going to take him completely off guard, and his 4th really, just ended up getting melted. The Matrices will start to whittle down a lot of the Calculisks, but I'm not so sure that it's going to be enough. The Drakedons are on their way forward. The ground army is being tickled to death by all of the different static defense forces, but if all of these workers are anything to show for, I think DF is going to have to call GG. Calculus even mopping up the front line, despite getting engaged upon quite nicely. And there's still maybe 6-7 Calculisks chasing workers into the natural. I don't know that DF can hold on here. I don't know that he's got any units coming. His Ancestral Archives is not producing any units. And he's got 1 Draken to his name. Maybe a witness somewhere else on the map. GG is called. And Mesk takes us to Game 5. Infinite velocity is our decider, ladies and gentlemen, but I need some water. So I will return in a moment. Oh, not nearly enough water. How are we feeling, guys? Do you guys got Mesk to take the 3rd and final game? It's on infinite velocity. It could end in tears and tragedy for either one of these players. And it could end fast, or it could end slow. I want predictions in the chat. Mesk takes it, or DF takes it. And if they take it, is it fast, or is it drawn out and bitter? You decide. All right, let's get ready for our final game. I think this is actually the first Game 5 we've had in a playoff match. I might be wrong about that. But either way, we're going to get into it, and it's going to be beautiful. DarkenedFantasies on the left.
That's 3!
And Mesk on the right. As That's 3 plays, he's Terran. Oh, his worst race randomed in the final game? Just as the same time as we get more 3s from Alexander. Dude, sponsored sips. Talk about timing. I was just about to take one. Oh, wait. Weren't you already on this? I'm confused. Did you re-up? Are you giving us 2 times 3 times... Well, are you giving us 3 times 3 times 2? What the What's going on here, boy? Appreciate it, of course, but I need an explanation. Now, DF is on the way to scout the conventional route. Again, for those uninitiated. There's a Nidus here. It takes you here. The future stations that are on fire explode. I can't remember exactly when, but I think it's around the 2-minute mark, maybe the 3-minute mark, because 3. A Fulcrum is going to be keeping watch on that. And this pylon will be able to build a gateway over here, if that's exactly what DF wants to do. Instead, he's going to go for a lattice. Interesting. So he could end up bypassing the Nidus entirely by going early Vassal, killing the Nidus, and then walking across with, or flying across, rather. We'll see what he wants to do. Ah, okay. You were on tier 2, and now you're on tier... Dude, you teched up! You got to tier 3! I'm so proud of you, dude. And by that, I mean thanks, homie. Really appreciate it. Dude, tell me this isn't hype, though. We're on to game 5. Mesk says he couldn't do it. Ends up going in and randoming his Terran. Now, he is going for a Quarry first. This is after the Fulcrum, of course, so it's Quarry second, technically. I don't think that DF's Scribe can get too much action done here because the Fulcrum is just about to finish. And the Vulture is out. So the Vulture could end up going through. A Vassal is on the way, so eventually the Vulture would die to the Vassal. Almost gets away without taking hull damage. For shame. And yes, it does look like it'll be the 2.5 to 3 minute mark when these structures burn down. The first Vassal is flying all the way to the other side, and another Lattice is on the way. Oh no. Oh, DF. You've lost your Scribe. You have no way to confirm the scout. A Goliath is going to follow up the Vulture. That's actually going to cover the Vassal raid in the early game. Another Vassal is on the way, but again, it's being rallied across the whole map. The future stations are just about to burn down, and Mesk is already going to be able to cross. Okay, well, another Vassal is here in just a moment, so DF can correct this as soon as the Vulture comes across if he's paying attention. He needs to pull this one back and probably try to drill with the Scribes. This isn't really the end of the world. Mesk actually does have to micro this. So far, he's not killed a single Scribe. Oh no, Mesk! Oh no! Now, you can get the Lobster Mine to affect the air units, but he just helped him out. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. The man himself stomps on over with a Goliath. Well, he doesn't send it through yet, so he can just go ahead and retaliate with this one. I think he should be able to save himself here. Now, the focus fire is there for DF, but I think he can probably just drop a single Watchdog, send one Goliath through to continue the pressure. Not sure where the Simulacrum went. Okay, it's actually gone down the low ground way. I don't know if there's really much kill pressure here is the thing. This is going to be very chaotic to spectate in a moment, but the Vassals are being recalled to deal with the Goliath. It's going to take a long time for them to deal with the Goliath, ladies and gentlemen. Now, where did the second Goliath go? It's actually down on the low ground, and it's just following another one. The Nidus is starting to get tickled. Sims are being started. These ones will stop the pylon from doing too much. And obviously the pylon, yeah, it's not going to end up falling there. What is his reaction? He goes for a Watchdog. I think it just turns into a simple standard game at this point, right? The second Goliath did end up coming through, and there's no Nidus there to speak of, so he will not be able to get out. Manages to get the last shot there. Oh no, it's actually this one down there at the bottom. You thought I was finished? My brother is on the low ground. Well, the Vulture doesn't need to worry about laying any mines anywhere over there, so he can just lay mines on the front. Probably expand that way as well. Gonna go ahead and refocus his efforts on mining minerals, it looks like, with only one guy on gas, as he grabs a treasury with the intent to expand. He knows that DF is probably not harvesting any gas whatsoever and is just spamming out sims and vassals. This means that he can itemize his composition accordingly. I'm not sure if he even paid attention, though. Did he know that DF has almost no gas? Either way, that's not going to be the case for very long, as he's starting to harvest with both geysers now. The vassals are on their way. How annoying can they be? That's the real question. Some manifolds have been ordered. They're fairly nimble. Some good chip damage onto some of these. And a watchdog is in place. Actually, two are in place, so there's really no hope for any sustained amounts of damage. Just slowing him down. And laying some mines ahead of time. Treasury will head to the back base. Another vassal has been slain mercilessly. Oh, unfortunately, the Goliaths have decided it's a good idea to charge on forward. Well, I say unfortunately, but I guess it didn't end up affecting either player particularly much. Treasury lands. Will the workers be transferred? Doesn't immediately go for a quarry. Another fulcrum on the way. More Goliaths. An anchor. Okay. We're starting to see some general play. He could actually lift this watchdog and put it over here as the quarry gets set up and workers get transferred, if he so desires. That would be my suggestion. A vulture maintaining ground in the bottom middle can probably eventually put its show its business over there. That fulcrum does end up getting tickled. Shades of the first game where he tries to build his tech far away and then gets absolutely slapped for it. A watchdog is indeed up. He didn't lift it, he just built one. And actually 2 more are on the way, so that natural will be well protected, but it's not yet contributing to the economy. He does have a quarry there, so it's contributing to his worker count, but he's not yet mining. Goliath's holding down the fort. More vassals are going to move their way over. Again, just absolutely slapped forever. Oh, the Goliaths are actually being lured. Okay, thankfully he figures that out. The watchdog in this position should be more than enough to deal with this, so... Plus the Goliaths are totally fine. However, the front gate is under attack, and the manifolds are starting to be focused down. They are the heaviest hitter unit here, but most of the time you're just going to be looking at this and thinking, I'm getting tickled to death. The wounded Goliaths do wisely make it into the anchor, but it's not in a great position in general. Needs one more shot onto that one, and it will be done. Another one absolutely dead. Some of the workers are being tickled to death, and the anchor does start to lift off and make its way over. Despite the worker harassment here, Mesk is still ahead in workers. Remember that. Against Terran, with all the worker production queues they have access to in the early stages of the game, you really aren't going to get too much done unless you kill maybe 20 plus workers. That might even end up happening here, but DF is still on one base. So despite all of the dead workers, I hope that Mesk remembers that aspect of the Terran race. Now, the rally is, or the general move command is not going to be the wisest of choices. More manifolds have made it across the map. More Goliaths are coming out of the queues, and oh, look at that! The mine detonates and really heavily cuts down on the amount of DPS able to be pushed out here by the manifolds. 3 of them ended up getting absolutely slapped for that fight. Remember that every time the Sims split, they are taking hull damage as part of the job there, so that's still pretty quite significant. More vassals are on the way to hopefully enchant, and some Panoptises as well, meanwhile. So that's where the gas is going, outside of manifolds. Again, his fulcrums are over here. His anchor is over here. I see a problem with this. But Goliaths are pretty reasonable against Panoptises. They outrange them quite considerably. He's actually going to go ahead and lift them off, and he does have watchdogs covering his natural. He doesn't have anything mining from his base in the main here, so that's a significant difficulty here for him to really control. The Panoptis is actually going to be holding the ramp, it looks like, for now. Vassals are instantly going to get melted. And the Sims are not long for this world either. The Goliath reposition, or the anchor repositions. The Goliath is attempting to being focused down, but I don't think it's going to be doing enough. And here comes the Panoptis showing its head. That is a very wounded Goliath being repaired. I don't know that that's going to be enough. Anchor is going to reposition yet again. Maybe try to hold the ramp here this time around. Or at least get a little bit more of a forward position. The Panoptis does show. Anchor is going to fall back, and it will need to be repaired, but the Masons are not jumping onto that just yet. Trying to focus down the Panoptis. Not necessarily a wise choice, and unfortunately, we fucking crashed. Absolutely slapped. Well, I have no idea what could have caused that, so... Maybe it was just me. Let's see if they say something. Nope, they also got it. Well, the worst has happened, boys. We'll have to play again. Take a second to check things out. I'm looking at the, well, I'm about to be looking at the error file. Oh, did I start on the... I didn't start on the right version. Okay. It's second nature to him. He just thinks he's the president. All right, we'll wait for us to reset here. In the meantime, I'll take a look at that error. Unfortunately, the nature of reverse engineering and the nature of Blizzard's code makes crashes a somewhat inevitability. But we have made the mod much more stable than it used to be. The question is whether or not we can bump up and get the rest of them done as well. I don't think that this is a crash that would have been fixed. The only crash that's fixed on pre-release that isn't on release, besides all the stuff related to the selection extender, which also isn't enabled on release, is an AI-related crash. So this is definitely a new one that probably is still present in the old stuff here. I can at least take a look at what this might be related to. Game loop top. That's not very specific, actually. We call it game loop state. This might have been something in game hooks, which is a very common thing, or a very large thing. So that match was interesting because it went for a vassal push in the early stages. All right, we'll try a redo here. Mesk has rolled Protoss this time around. I actually was thinking maybe he should redo his Terran, but does it really, like, in the spirit of that, then obviously we replay the same game and it's like awkwardly confusing. At the very least, DF has the same spawn as before. Not the same color. He's purple this time. And Mesk is beige. Well, he'll also scout first, so DF will have an early confirmation of the race of his opponent. And I think he has a little bit more practice PvP because of his group. So he obviously faced off against Heltrix quite a lot. Well, I say quite a lot. It was 2 games, but, you know. Neither player looking at the scout. Oh, never mind. Mesk saw the scout. Not the player who needed to see the scout, mind you, but Mesk did see the scout. Just going for the same thing. Do it to him again. Vassal time. It's going to be a gateway, but the vassals... yeah, I mean, I guess in enough numbers, you might need like 4 or 5 of them to overwhelm a Darkened, but it's quite possible to get to that point. The question is that even going to be what Mesk goes for here when he scouts out the lattice? Is he even going to scout out the lattice? Oh, yeah, he is. Okay. Well, I mean, he's scouting. I don't know if he's going to scout the lattice specifically. There's probably some weird thing you can do with this map where you... I feel like there's something weird you can do with the pylon placement where you can, like, you know, in PvZ and Brood War, a cannon rush is a viable strategy because you, like, wall off the position with pylons and then build cannons behind it, and then your Zethrakors or your Zerglings, rather, can't actually go there. So that's a little interesting. I'm not quite sure that that works out overall. Beaten into a corner. Beaten into a pulp. He's like, ha, I got his worker! And then he looks back and he's like, oh shit, he got my worker. Well, a fairly standard opener, actually. A little bit more standard. I mean, obviously, DF has gone for Sims instead of something more conventional. And as the future stations combust, Manifold is on the way. Obviously, Sims are not going to be it versus the Darkened. They have 2 armor. Sims have no armor pen, I believe. So they're dealing 4 damage a pop. The Manifold will fare a little bit better, but I feel like this one could end a little bit quick. Oh, no, actually, Mesk is not interested. He's just going after the Nidus. Obviously, when you attack one side, you actually don't see whether or not the other side has any sort of attacks. He's just confirming that it still exists. How long will he stand vigil is the question. Second gateway going down for Mesk. Meanwhile, we are already at our second lattice. Is it going to be Lattice Stargate again? I feel like that composition could work out pretty well, but against Protoss, you are relying on the Manifolds to deal a lot of damage and the Vassals to speed up you're relying on the Panoptises to deal a lot of damage and the Vassals to speed up the Panoptises. A Matrix is being put down. That is expensive in the gas department. It's 50 gas. But it's also there for the... This is a Stargate. It's also going to be there for the... Vassals, right? That's what it's really... Mesk is thinking it's Vassals. It's actually not Vassals just yet. Instead, it's mostly manifolds, 2 sims for the early game, and some vassals are going to come now to accompany the Panoptus into Mesk's base, no doubt. 3 Drakedens are on their way across the map. Neither player seeming interested in expanding, but they have gone for divergent build paths, so this is definitely going to be a little bit different. Certainly from the last game. The 2 vassals are going to scout out first, one of them earmarked for the natural base, the second for the main, and we'll spot out the matrix. And maybe confirm to Mesk that vassals are indeed present. More of them have been trained, more of them are flying away. This force cannot break the ramp here, depending on... Well, maybe depending on what happens here. He's instantaneously dropped shields, and that one in particular has lost 40 HP. So, not crippling, but certainly something worth noting. Drakeden instantaneously firing on this vassal, which is just going to fly away and disregard it. Confirming the position here. Not worried about anything because of the matrix. Doesn't deal an incredible amount of damage, but obviously can target up to 4 units. Drakeden will finish here and deal with these vassals. Another one even coming back to ensure. Using the flight to the Avengeance, right? The Vengeful Ascension. Cornerstone there, where the vassal corpse is consumed. And that speeds up DF's vassals. Another attempt at just a flyover, a scout, confirming an expansion. What does this do to DF's decision-making? He's actually rallied over a land effect. It's no Panoptus in sight, so he just intends to disable the Matrix, perhaps the Drakedens in the middle of open ground, and then tickle them to death. Well, I say that, but there's also a Panoptus here, so... I'm just wrong. Missed that. He's going to go ahead and send his early units out. He recognizes his opponent, going for more of a macro-oriented play. Can't realistically achieve a more, conventional spot here, it doesn't look like. He's actually losing quite a few of his vassals in the early stages of the game. This is not, completely pointless, right? Vassals are cheap, but not that cheap. Looks like maybe these Drakedens were spotted. DF does not want to endanger himself yet. He's going to go ahead and take the aggro with the Panoptus. That will allow his manifolds to try to close the gap. But this is still a bit of a disadvantageous fight. The Panoptus will go down. A little bit of extra micro could have saved him there, but instead he's going to charge on forward with the lattice units. Benefit from the splitting of the sims. And now there's only 2 Drakedens, one of which is half HP that remain. So certainly not a threat, but they interrupt the plan of attack. Might pick off a couple of additional lattice units in the meantime. So the significance of this is that now Mesk has basically safely expanded. He's getting additional defenses for the low ground path. He confirms that his opponent has gone for the Stargate tech. DF now needs to spend some of his exceeding amounts of money on preferably expanding his macro capacity. He's going to go for another Panoptus, but having lost the first one versus the more standard play of Mesk here, which is weird to say, he's not necessarily going to be in a position to punish the more, you could say, economic focus that has recently been filtered out. Now, the engram is expensive, and it's something that is clearly because Mesk fears a Panoptus move out. The land effect can, of course, disable it, thus allowing the Matrix to be focused down by the Panoptus and co. But I don't think that's actually going to happen here. And, of course, the land effect disruption field does not do anything to pylons. It doesn't stop pylons from powering stuff. It just disables weaponry. So that's another thing that's important to note. When this is scouted out, I think DF is going to realize there's not really any way he can punish. His best hope is to contain and maybe use vassals and Panoptuses to deny a potential third base in the back, or anywhere else on the map for that matter, while he stations his ground force here, and did indeed deny a scribe scout. I assume it was a scout, but it could have also been an attempt at taking another base. Now, Mesk can still wrap all the way around down here, but this could also be occupied by even just 2 manifolds or something to that effect. A Nexus has been planted in the back. This base is pretty comparable to this base in terms of resources. What do we have? Well, we have a fight, so we'll talk about that later. The land effect does end up getting focused down, but did disable a number of Drakedens. Looks like a couple other units did end up getting focused, but the manifolds are not an even trade machine for the Drakedens. The Drakedens definitely do a lot more damage there. And one of the wounded ones was not even focused down, so that's also going to be a little bit awkward. Could focus down this one right here, but DF is just pulling his forces back, marshalling them again, and seeing where else he can go. The Panoptus is also returning. Actually, there's 2 of them on the field. A third one just finished. So he'll withdraw and allow Mesk to stretch his legs a little bit as another engram gets put down over here. So Mesk is consolidating his position before he expands outward. I think he's spending way too many minerals, way too many resources in general on, you know, what would you say? He's spending it too much on static defense for sure. But he does have a witness out. And in fact, I don't think DF has one out at all. Yeah. So definitely behind on the workers, behind on the ability to spend the gas that he has, and certainly behind on the mineral income as well. That's what DF finds himself in as far as his position is concerned. But he does have enough units to handily and easily thwart any would-be attempt at by Mesk to, I think, really do anything at this point for an aggressive position. Now, the Panoptuses are hunting for an open target. Maybe they can depower these gateways. It seems like that's what DF wants to try to do, but unfortunately for him, his positioning was such that the first Panoptus to take aggro was indeed the wounded one. So instead, he's going to fall back. He does have a land effect out, and he does, in fact, he even sees. He's trying to go ahead and... He's trying to splash the witness to death with the land effect. That's cute. It's not going to work, but it's cute. Now, he could go ahead and charge forward onto these Drakedons and then disable a bunch of them. The Panoptuses are just barely out of range of flying right into them, so I don't think they necessarily see each other here. Maybe the Panoptus sees the Drakedon, but not vice versa. The vision range, of course, is 8 for the Drakedon, and it is 9 for the Panoptus, so technically that could have been possible. DF going to try his best, but there's obviously a witness here spotting over the cliff, so that's not going to work. And yeah, Mesk is going to go ahead and re-aggress, right? Going for a very slow attempt at taking the space, as he puts some Drakedons up to make sure that Panoptuses do not deny him yet again. Elsewhere, some saturation has begun, and an embassy is complete. The land effect has already taken some fire. It will go ahead and go for a disable. It's successfully isolating all of the Drakedons. You would need to split them apart from each other and then go for that, but the land effect is going to go ahead and fall back. The Panoptuses, meanwhile, are on a bit of a collision course with this 4 Drakedon squad. I say 4 because one of them did end up getting popped on the mineral line. DF feels a little bit more empowered than maybe he did before, but meanwhile, a Strident Stratum for Artisans and a Grand Library for Atriuses has been concluded. Again, it feels like Mesk should have more than he actually does, but at this stage, as we see the disabling once again getting the better of him, he's not in a really good spot to have a lot of military force. There you go. A witness spotting off the back base there. Might be an opportunity for him to harass with something like the Artisan that can, of course, fly over and start warping in wardens and the like. Might be interested in trying to do a proxy-oriented play. A lot of static defense being set up over here, and not nearly enough land effects to disable them all, so that's going to be an interesting move. What DF can do is obviously task 1 land effect here, 1 land effect here, and that would disable pretty much everything while his rest of his forces, you know, his Panoptuses and etc., you know, deal with the rank and file. But there's an Atrius and 4 Drakedons here, plus a Cantavis idling for the opportunity to storm. The witness is still spying the production, and we'll see the kinds of units that are popping out as long as Mesk is paying attention. But right now, he's opting for an Argosy in his natural expansion. The back base will be contested yet again, but it's only 3 Panoptuses, and I'm not so sure that they're going to have enough here. He will disable some of the Drakedons, but the engram makes short work of the land effect, and that's pretty much just going to be everything in flames. Yes, 2 of his Panoptuses do escape, but only barely. Heavily bruised. No efforts going to be made to repair them because he's not Terran. Really going to go ahead and try to dive bomb the pylon this time around, it looks like, but not quite going to be enough just yet. Really going to try to focus them down. But here come the Drakedons, and they will snipe one of them as they try to make their very fast escape. The Artisan has been rallied down to the bottom middle of the map, but it's not yet being used. That's a very expensive unit, for people who do not know. It's not like the advanced workers of the other races, because you can make it without needing a tech node, so you pay a lot more of a premium every single time. A misplaced Nexus, nonetheless, will still allow him to take the space, and structures warped in by the Artisan warp in faster than they do when you warp them in with a Scribe. So another thing to remember about the advanced workers, that's true for all of them. Some very interesting rally points here as Blizzard tries to do... Well, actually, Mesk tries to rally his workers, but Blizzard also tries their best at pathfinding. The enchanted vassals and panoptises are once again going to fly around and try to confirm the presence of bases. This engram is not long from completion, so even with the speed boost from the vassals, I don't know that DF will be able to find that base in the bottom middle and do anything about it with that squadron of units. With 3 bases active, it's definitely a situation where Mesk has the upper hand, not just in terms of worker counts, where he's up by 45. He's also going to be in an awkward position to deal with the, well, DF, that is going to be an awkward position to deal with the fact that there is a 4th base on the way. The Matrix is here. The Artisan is going to continue expanding the reaches and territories. And a Magister has been started from this Argosy. Now, this witness does spy quite a bit about the composition here, and for some reason... Oh, no, that's actually his witness. It being over the lights here made me think it was like a different color, but obviously DF is purple. So never mind. That is not a witness for DF. DF is definitely a bit on the back foot here. Now, this will probably be a pylon plus like maybe a warden or an engram or something, just to make this annoying to deal with later, if he ever wants to take that bottom base with all the gas. More units are being made. DF does have a military advantage, at least numerically. In terms of quantity, yes. Quality, maybe not so much. Again, there's Magisters, there's Drakedins, there's an Atreus and Cantavis, there's a couple of Zealots. All of these are a little bit more durable than the units coming out of the lattice. And the Panoptises themselves are engagement dependent, or at the very least requiring critical mass if you want to just A-move with them. Now, the 3rd base has been completed for DF, but he's not yet saturated it, and again, he's behind now almost 60 workers. Slowly but surely going to start to equalize that, and he does have a bit of a ring of witnesses stationed at various points, so he'll catch any additional move-outs at the very least, and that will be quite effective for him. But he is still none the wiser about this base, and there's a lot of static defense being put up to defend it. Actually, rooting that base out seems like it will be quite the difficult task with the tools that DF currently has given himself. The rogue galleries will offer him a cheap, mineral-heavy dump, and that will allow him to build vagrants, which are powerful units that once they actually suffer fatal damage, become twice as fast in terms of their movement and attack speeds, but have timed life, and obviously can still be focused down to be killed. A very slow creep of additional efforts is being made here, as this Artisan is still tickling its way up and leaving a daisy chain of pylons. I'm not so sure when DF will recognize that that's happening. He might be lost in the sauce a little bit as his very enchanted Panoptises are continuing to fly across the map. Engrams galore are being put together here, but there are units here that can squash this. I just don't know if he recognizes it. Now he does. The vassals should test themselves onto the Artisan so that they can catch it, chase it down to death. And these engrams need to be cancelled, otherwise Mesk will be in a very awkward position. Just going to go after the pylons. In theory, not a bad move, but these pylons warp in so fast because they're made by an Artisan. I'm not so sure that he recognizes that. All of the structures are warping in much faster. So, indeed, these are going to be taken care of as far as the power fields are concerned. But there's a pylon coming in there. The Artisan does get focused down, and thankfully that pylon will be focused down before it can power anything else. So there you go. That's a lot of expensive structures that are going to go down the drain, but Mesk has 4 bases online. DF has not yet saturated his gas in either his main or his natural. Or his 3rd, in fact. So he's actually quite far behind. I don't think he noticed that there was an engram over there, but maybe he just thinks it's not very worthwhile to deal with. 2 witnesses are on their way, maybe establishing some patrol routes or generally spying for more positions. They will actually see these Magisters here, and that will be the end of them. But those Magisters will be no match for the enchanted Panoptises. A Didact has made its presence known, but I don't know that a recall is coming up anytime soon. A lot of idle scribes. Mesk is not too interested in using them. He doesn't need them. A 2nd Didact. There's definitely some plans here, and Crucibles are enchanting, I'm not sure what. I guess the Strident Stratum in the embassy. What? He tried to storm the witness, I think. More sassing has occurred. Looks like maybe that was a vassal or something. Obviously, that can be taken care of relatively easily. This witness still spying the production, and additional production not really forthcoming, I guess, for either player. A lot of Drakenins are going to be ordered around, and I still don't think Mesk has noticed that he's got a lot of idle workers. Many more Wardens on the way. A Monument of Sin as well. So that's what this double Crucible is for. Well, this engram is not long for the world, although it does claim a couple of vassals here to supercharge the Panoptises even more. And the Drakenins get caught on the small amount of paltry Tier 1 forces over here. A couple of these will end up going down, but it will be an overwhelmingly Mesk-favored fight, particularly with the lack of focus fire coming out of DF. Although, to be fair, the cliff advantage is helping out quite a bit, so plus the fact that Mesk isn't kiting forward to really try to lay in the hurt. Hey, here come the Panoptises to clean up the rest, and they do indeed even focus in on the low HP ones. So there you go. Managed to get something out of that. Another Drakenin found an interesting position to rest in. Even DF doesn't know what to make of that. The Witness position is very, very lethal. The Monument of Sin will, of course, turn into, almost certainly provide an Anthelion. And if the Witness can just be in a good spot to deal with that, then provide vision for it, etc., that will be pretty spooky. Instead, I think we might be seeing a trick shot in some saga. The Star Sovereign can be recalled during its glassing cannon, and that will obviously bring the damage fields with it. Very spooky and very interesting. But will that be how Mesk attempts to close the game? Still 4 bases to 3, now getting up to all of this gas down here as well. I mean, we are going to see quite the amount of units in favor of Mesk here momentarily. So just look at his worker count. I could still see Mesk feeling like he's very far behind once his bases start to fall, but on a map like Infinite Velocity, and with a playstyle like Mesk's, you have to think that he's going to be A-OK in a longer game. Finally going to be taking a 4th base is DF, but he still is not bothering to mine gas from hardly anywhere. More Vagrants on the way. He seems to be trying to hunt down Witnesses. I think he might have actually found that one. There's the corpse for it, and he's got his own Monument of Sin coming. So there won't be any opportunities for an Anthelion to make any headway, but the double Didact strat, obviously they do cloak themselves now, can be put into play at pretty much any time. They're very slow, and there are Witnesses everywhere, so it's not even a guarantee that they'll get out undetected. But it's something that he can do if he wants to bring his Star Sovereigns to bear. He's even queued one up with 4 Crucibles enchanting this Monument of Sin. If we increase the animation speed fast enough, that would work out quite well. But unfortunately, we don't have the ability to do that. Instantaneously slapped, but the Didact was revealed. Oh dear. A witness patrol has been established. Got a patrol for hostile witnesses as well. I don't know, this is a pretty tense match. A little bit on knife's edge here with not so many in the way of workers for DF. Another witness will make its way over here to see a whole band of them. Fine. What is the strat? What is DF's gonna... What is his game plan? Does he even know? Does he even know that there's like an ocean of static defense and a whole lot of Star Sovereigns? Plus the double Didact potential? Well, the fight is going to start to kick us off here. Panoptises try to make their way in. Vassals will, of course, take some damage. The Cantavis gets focused down after a single storm. But look at all of that. The land effect was never used to disable a whole host of these units, and that could have definitely helped to turn the tide. Meanwhile, the Didact obviously is going to keep them cloaking, which will allow the flash shielding to occur in between shots and movement. No stasis field necessary here. He found his scribes at some point, at the very least, and is going to transfer them over here while a nexus is constructed by the artisan for faster speeds. The one warden and the very low path here. This could be death for a lot of the Striders, but the Atreus will deal some splash damage, so it has to be concerned about that. Here comes the Star Sovereign for none other than DF. Land effect is here to disable, and it kind of overshoots the mark, but it will indeed be able to at least make it a little bit more awkward for these Drakedins to get much done. More Atreus is down here, but there's not really any air units to stack with anymore, and the land effect even withdraws to safeguard itself. It will go ahead and disable the Atreus down south, while the one Atreus there is as good as toast. But the Star Sovereign War is definitely going to be Mesk-sided here, as he positions a lot of his up in this direction. They're on attack move, so this Witness will get blown up. And if DF was paying attention there, then he'll have known that there's a lot of Star Sovereigns headed his way. Imagine if a single land effect does the job. Feels unlikely. No Enthelians, as far as we can see. Didact stretching its legs here as it moves forward. And the Star Sovereigns are going to come to the middle. I don't know if there's much that DF can do about this when he sees the sheer quantity of Star Sovereigns. Plus the Didacts to maybe stun or otherwise disrupt a lot of these. No need to activate the glassing cannons. You can just start engaging with them from far away. Stasis could work on the ramp, but it's not really going to be too necessary. And this base is toast. A lot more units are on the way, but not a whole lot to counter the Star Sovereigns. The second one is just about to finish. There's just so much money on the map for Mesk, and not nearly as much for DF. He's got a lot of minerals in his bank. The vassals are going to go ahead and try to do what they can to tickle the Star Sovereigns, but I don't think it's going to be enough, even though they do force them to turn around. Hey, look at that! Somehow that Vagrant held his head high as he faced down the threat of the Drakedin. Some scribes are returning over here because they're hopeful that they can continue harvesting. Not quite. You'll pull one of them out of position, but that's about it. More Drakedins streaming in. A couple epigraphs here. More Star Sovereigns being constructed. Argosies and another Monument of Sin. Because yes, Mesk can afford to produce off of 2 Monuments of Sin at one time, alongside everything else he's making. So he's got his money spent. Crucibles are being added to the Monument of Sin here. More lattices as well for, of course, Mass Vassal. And it looks like Star Sovereign Vassal will be the intended composition for DF. In theory, he could try to overwhelm everything, but the splash present for things like the Engram is going to make actually winning with that particular composition very hard. He's finally decided to start harvesting gas from his third base. I'm sure that was quite an oof moment when he realized that he wasn't doing that. Three Star Sovereigns remain for DF. He did not lose the other one. And with 5 Crucibles enchanting his Monument of Sin, that actually is more than the 4 enchanting this one. But the Didacts are on the front line, so as you can see, a recall has been initiated. He's just going to go ahead and continue rallying units through, including Scribes, because why not? The Engram does try to start dealing some damage there, and it's not too shabby, as far as dealing some splash and piercing the heavy armor of the Star Sovereign. Unfortunately for DF, I'm not so sure he's got what it takes to finish this engagement off. His Witness is well placed to deal with the cloaking of the Didacts. And there's a pylon putting up over here, so yeah, I think that may have been a mistake for Mesk to rally in the workers, but if it wasn't, well, it doesn't matter too much. Oh dear. I think the upset is happening, boys. I just can't really quite see how DF is going to make his way past this. 3 more Star Sovereigns have joined the fight. The 4 are still intact. Magisters are on their way. Epigraphs are on their way. Scribes are idling because they're watching from their tablets. And the engagement has continued. Yes, there are more Star Sovereigns, and yes, there's a whole boatload of vassals, but no, there's no selection extender yet. And I think there's just too damn many Star Sovereigns for Mesk. I think he's going to complete the upset right here and now. He doesn't need his Magisters. I don't think he needs hardly anything that he's got. Now, while the Engram is dealing with the Drakened Menace, it's not dealing with the stacked Star Sovereigns over there. I think that's just going to be it. In a glorious explosion, the Star Sovereigns for DF have crumbled, and his Monument of Sin is idle. With 6 Star Sovereigns still remaining for Mesk, and engrams outside the base denying any would-be push-out, is it even going to be enough? The Pylon powering the Monument of Sin, well, the Crucibles also provide power, but stay with me here. The DF Pylon is going to soon be dealt with. That's his symbol of hope. And the glassing will commence. GG has been called before we even get to see it. And Mesk has taken the series. Absolute scenes. Unfortunately, we'll never know what would have surmised or happened in the match there with the Protoss versus Terran, but there's just too many workers for Mesk to call it in favor of DF. If he had killed like a lot of the workers, or if Mesk hadn't built so many workers, I would have said, oh yeah, he was definitely going to win. In that particular context, I feel like it was still an even game. Well, as unfortunate as the bug in the Nitro Valley game was, and obviously the crash in the Infinite Velocity game was, as scuffed as it was, Mesk has been able to thrive in such very silly situations, and he will meet the Shambler in the semifinals, it seems. Absolute scenes. I think I've done the analysis enough justice, so we will go ahead and close it out here. And of course, improve the project going forward. I think the next time we have Ascension, you will actually be able to unload structures without tisming out. And maybe that will bring a smile to DF's, oof face. God damn it.